But yes, into the predictions, and I'm afraid it doesn't start on a very happy note. First one is called the Bonfire of Big Pharma. No one's going to accuse me of being dramatic, are they? But what I'm actually predicting here is a very specific number, 20% cut to commercial. A lot of people have probably just said, that's not very nice, that's where I work. But I do genuinely believe that the writing is on the wall. And I have been doing a lot of interviews with C-level people in the last couple of months to find out the truth. Obviously, we are familiar with Novartis's cuts, but in many ways, I think it's a disease that's going to catch, and we're going to see a lot of cuts going across our commercial departments this year, not just to the sales reps, which is what I predicted last year, but at HQ and senior levels as well. I hear so many quotes like this: when whiteboarding the launch of new specialty medicines, and of course we all know that our industry is focused increasingly on specialty medicines, we recognize that the way that we're structured and scaled today is the exact opposite of what is desirable. I hear statements like this all the time. I believe very specifically that by the end of 2023, we will see a 20% cut in permanent staff in commercial HQ and country positions. And I think we're going to see core teams driving partnership arrangements. What I do see is an increase, though. I do see a corresponding increase in flexible working and people working in new ways. I do, of course, see rise in medical affairs. I'm very bullish on medical affairs. I believe it's increasingly important part of our organizations, including MSLs. Many people said to me about how their intention is to increase budget and headcount in those areas going forward. Partnership and outsourcing models will increase, but it's not going to be the same as what we've got used to in the clinical space with the CRO model. I think we're going to have a different situation from that. And what I'm actually going to do right now, Noreen, if you'll let me, is to invent a new word, a new phrase, which I'm calling CAPS. So let me explain what the hell do I mean by CAPS. So I believe we're going to see commercial adaptive partnerships going forward. That sounds like a piece of pharma jargon, doesn't it? So what the hell do I mean? It's essentially what I think will have typically two partners, one of which is the originator or the owner of the drug, so a pharma company typically, or a biotech, and one is a sort of vendor company, but they are not working on a fee-for-service basis anymore. They're working on a profit share, on an incentivized fee arrangement with low or no upfront cash payment. So that's very, very important because of how these units will actually be managed going forward. And we do see this happening, by the way. There are green shoots of this happening already. So the one partner, as I said, is the medicine owner and the originator on one side. That's typically the pharma or the biotech company. We hear so many stories about how, in launch situations, there's a delay in the regulatory climate or maybe the HTA decisions, and where, people have had to build out commercial teams, but they're sitting doing nothing for months because of unexpected situations. We've obviously got just increasing pressure on the ROI that we're delivering across all of these teams. And we've got a situation where biotech companies are desperate right now because they've been unable to go to the capital markets to build their own commercial units, if that's what they want to do. They're very low valuations, so they don't want to sell out to big pharma if they can possibly help it. And they're looking for a third way, an alternative. They want to find a way of retaining ownership of their products, building a commercial operation, but not actually to build it themselves, to be able to enter into one of these caps in order to be able to do that and to work with commercial providers on a risk-sharing, profit-sharing basis. On the commercializing group, they're going to have to be a large provider. They're going to have to be one of the familiar names that we're working with, or they need to be a kind of coalition. They need to be part, they need to have agency. They need to have contract sales. They need to have technology solutions, and they have to be very well capitalized to be able to work on a profit share or incentivized basis. But they do still, of course, need to be managed well. They need to have a single point of management within them, and they need to be able to perform that flexibility. They need to be willing to scale up and down their staff on an immediate basis, more so even than the world in clinical. And they, of course, need to have experience in specific therapy areas, which of course are more and more sophisticated. So they have to be real industry experts. So these sorts of arrangements, I can see the green shoots of it happening already. And I think we're going to see a lot more of these kind of coalitions or large scale providers actually offering this and working with companies on a much more partnered basis than a client vendor basis.
And Paul, do you think this is kind of what gets us to actually looking at value-based care, outcomes-based care? I mean,
that is a very interesting question, and it's not something I've thought about massively, but I believe that the main reasons for the lack of value-based care are more external than internal. Yes, we can blame ourselves, but we blame ourselves because we've been unable to work out the proper working mechanisms for working with external organizations in assessing and managing that value, and just thus being able to afford it. So yes and no is the answer to your question.
Okay.
I'm going to come out with that a lot.
Not yet.
I'm not going to go through these because it's going to take too long, but I do see that there are some other features of the caps that I think can be far better organized. We can actually make some of the agile and customer-centric approaches work. We can make sure that we're using the validated learning model, which we unfortunately don't do very well right now. And all of those things will be much better manageable inside one of these arrangements, where we can be more politics-free and more fluid in terms of our management approach. I also think that a large part of my rather dastardly prediction here is coming from the tech world, and we're all very familiar with what's happened at Twitter. I've already alluded to it. 4,400 roles were cut, more than 50% in the space of just a few weeks. Most of us average normal people, I'm calling myself that even though I know I'm very much a weirdo, kind of look at this with horror, don't we? You know, the idea of Elon Musk as our boss right now sounds pretty frightening, pretty horrific. But you've also got to remember that there's a lot of people who work in Silicon Valley who are probably going to look up to this. They've seen that you can run a company with less employees. And when you look at the share price losses of the major technology companies over the last year or so, you can see that they're under a lot of pressure to perform, and that in many cases have already started to cull their workforces. They're going to see what's been done at Twitter as an influencer, a positive thing that they can emulate. So we in Pharma may not want to, we may not be inspired by Elon Musk or by Twitter, but what we might be inspired about is the intermediate tier of tech companies and others who will try and recognize that they can run and operate on this kind of basis, and that this kind of tech sludge that is going to be created over the coming year is actually going to be quite influential. How can we have the same great taste, i.e. massive reduction in headcount and cost with fewer calories, revenue loss? This is what you're going to hear in every tech boardroom in 2023. And I think it will be more catching than people think.